It started like any other quiet morning on Earth. The sun rose gently over the blue horizon, and people all over the world woke up to another ordinary day. In offices, schools, farms, and cities, life moved as usual. News anchors talked about politics, sports, and weather, not realizing that in a few hours everything would change. For years, the world had been on edge. Countries had signed peace deals and trade agreements, but everyone knew that peace was fragile. Behind closed doors, governments still watched each other closely. Satellites circled the planet, and secret intelligence networks listened to every whisper that hinted at trouble. Somewhere in this uneasy peace, a secret group worked in silence. They called themselves the Vanguard 12. To the world, they didn't exist. They weren't part of any country, army, or corporation. But among themselves, they believed they were humanity's only hope. These were brilliant minds, former scientists, engineers, and researchers, who once worked on top government projects. But after years of being ignored and silenced, they turned away from the system that once employed them. They believed the Earth was in danger, not from war, but from nature itself. They claimed that the planet's magnetic field was weakening faster than anyone wanted to admit. According to them, within decades, solar storms would destroy satellites, power grids, and communication systems, throwing humanity into chaos. They warned governments, wrote reports, and sent data, but no one listened. Their warnings were buried, their research classified, and their reputations destroyed. So the Vanguard 12 decided to take matters into their own hands. For almost 3 years, they moved in shadows, gathering resources, building what they called Project Dawnfire. They claimed it was not a weapon, but a correction device, a way to stabilize Earth's magnetic field using energy pulses launched into orbit. But to everyone else, what they built looked exactly like missiles. Deep in an abandoned military complex in the deserts of Kazakhstan, the team worked day and night. Inside a half-collapsed bunker, computers hummed, metal clanged, and screens flickered with coded coordinates. No one outside that small circle knew what they were doing. Even among them, there were doubts. Some wanted to stop. Others said it was too late to turn back. On the morning of July 12th, the world's space monitoring systems began picking up strange readings. Radar stations in Europe, the United States, and Asia all detected several unidentified objects rising into the upper atmosphere. The first report came from a small observatory in Chile. A young technician saw faint trails moving in perfect formation and sent a report to his supervisor. But by the time it reached government networks, the information had already been flagged as false alarm. A few hours later, another report came from an Indian satellite command center. Unidentified launches detected, it read. Again, it was ignored. The world had seen enough false alarms over the years. Stray meteors, test rockets, and signal glitches. But this time was different. At 2:47 a.m. UTC, one of the satellites caught a clear image. 12 glowing dots, moving steadily across the night sky, leaving long silver trails behind them. They weren't meteors. They were missiles. The world's major defense agencies went on alert. Meetings were called in Washington, Beijing, Moscow, and London. At first, everyone suspected each other. The air grew tense. The peace everyone believed in for years suddenly felt like an illusion. Inside the bunker, the 12 figures stood silently around their screens. They watched as each missile left Earth's atmosphere and entered low orbit. There was no celebration, no cheers, only silence. They knew what this meant. Once the world found out, they would be hunted forever. But to them, it didn't matter anymore. They had already crossed the line. By 3:17 a.m., the first missile re-entered the atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean. The others followed, heading toward different parts of the globe. Each one had a different target. Not cities, but coordinates near power grids and communication hubs. Across the world, people looked up and saw strange lights streaking across the sky. Some thought it was a meteor shower. Others thought it was a sign from the heavens. In small towns and big cities, people took videos on their phones, not realizing they were recording history. Then, one by one, the missiles reached their targets. But instead of explosions, something else happened. The skies flickered. Power grids went down. Communication satellites began to fail. Air traffic systems glitched. Television screens went black and internet connections dropped. Within minutes, major cities lost contact with each other. Planes were forced to land. Ships drifted without navigation. People stood on rooftops, staring at the sky as the world suddenly fell silent. Governments scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings filled every major command room. Military leaders shouted orders. Scientists worked frantically to understand the signals, and leaders demanded answers. But no one knew what had just happened. In a quiet monitoring center in Japan, an old scientist looked at the satellite data and whispered, "This wasn't an attack. It's something else." Meanwhile, panic began to spread. Social media went dark. News stations could only broadcast for a few minutes at a time before their systems crashed. Rumors spread faster than truth, that aliens had attacked, that a world war had begun, that the end of the world had arrived. In homes everywhere, people gathered around candlelight trying to reach loved ones, trying to understand what was happening. Parents held their children, promising it would be okay, but deep down no one knew. Hours later, as the system slowly began to recover, scientists realized the missiles hadn't carried nuclear or chemical warheads. Instead, they had released an electromagnetic pulse, something powerful enough to disrupt technology, but not strong enough to destroy cities. The world had just witnessed the first global shutdown. Governments now faced a terrifying question. Who did this? And why? Within a day, international investigations began. Satellite paths were retraced, launch origins analyzed. That's when the truth started to surface. The missiles hadn't come from any nation. They had been launched from old, abandoned military sites, facilities long forgotten after the Cold War. Someone had used them again. As the puzzle pieces came together, a secret report landed on the desk of the Global Security Council. It read only 5 words. Project Dawnfire has been activated. The name meant nothing to most officials, but to a few it was like hearing a ghost from the past. Project Dawnfire was a theoretical experiment proposed years ago, a way to reset the planet's electromagnetic field. It had been dismissed as impossible, and the scientists behind it had disappeared after funding was cut. Now it was real. And the people who once tried to save the planet had just become the world's most wanted criminals. In every corner of the world, anger began to rise. News networks called them traitors. Governments promised justice. People demanded answers. Who gave them the right to decide Earth's fate? But somewhere, far from the noise and chaos, inside a dimly lit shelter covered in frost, one of the scientists sat alone, watching the sky glow faintly with the northern lights. His hands trembled as he whispered, "It's begun." He didn't mean the end of the world. He meant the beginning of the reckoning, not between nations, but between humanity and itself. And while the world cursed the names of those 12 unseen figures, no one yet realized that what they had done might not have been meant as destruction, but as a desperate attempt to save everyone. For now, the world only knew one thing: 12 missiles had been hurled at Earth, and humanity was ready to fight back. The world was no longer the same after that morning. People woke up to a silence they had never known before, a silence not caused by peace but by fear. Television channels played the same headline again and again: 12 missiles detected, global systems disrupted. In homes, people gathered around small battery radios, hoping to hear some good news. In hospitals, doctors struggled to keep machines running without power. Pilots sat stranded in airports, unsure if it was safe to fly. Everywhere there was confusion. The strange thing was, no city had been destroyed. No explosions, no smoke, no bloodshed. Yet the world felt broken. Governments called emergency meetings. The leaders of the world appeared on screens, speaking from dark rooms lit only by backup generators. Each one promised the same thing: "We will find out who did this." But deep inside, they were just as confused as everyone else. In the first few hours, every major nation blamed someone else. Some thought it was an attack from a rival country. Others whispered it might be aliens or hackers. But slowly the truth began to surface. Scientists studying the event discovered that the missiles had not come from any military base belonging to a known country. The launch coordinates pointed to forgotten places, old, deserted missile sites that were supposed to be deactivated decades ago. This discovery shocked everyone. Who had access to those places? Who could operate such complex technology in secret? That's when the words "the Vanguard 12" began to appear in classified reports. Intelligence agencies pieced together fragments of information: financial transactions, stolen satellite parts, secret communications between old scientists and engineers. Bit by bit, a picture formed of a group that had once been part of several international research projects, but had vanished years ago after being discredited. They had been dismissed as radicals, people who believed Earth's magnetic field was collapsing faster than anyone wanted to admit. At the time, no one had believed them. Governments buried their reports. But now, after what had just happened, everything they had said began to sound terrifyingly real. The missiles were not meant to kill. They were meant to correct something, but that didn't make people feel safer. The media began to spin endless theories. Some said these scientists wanted revenge on the world that ignored them. Others claimed they were testing a new weapon to control weather or communication. A few believed they were trying to protect Earth from something the rest of the world didn't yet understand. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. The people responsible had just become the most wanted humans on the planet. Around the world, governments joined forces to track them down. For the first time in decades, nations that once hated each other agreed to share their secrets. A new international command center was created in record time. They called it the Global Defense Alliance, a coalition built not for war but for pursuit. Drones scanned every known facility. Satellites focused on the old missile launch sites, and every intelligence network began tracing signals, trying to find even one clue about where the 12 were hiding. But while the leaders hunted for the culprits, ordinary people suffered the most. In many places, power was still down. Internet networks worked only part of the day. Hospitals were overfilled. Supermarkets ran out of food, and the atmosphere was filled with anger. People wanted someone to blame. They didn't care who the 12 were or what their reasons might be. They just wanted justice. In small towns, people gathered around televisions and shouted at the screens whenever the news mentioned the mysterious group. In big cities, protesters filled the streets holding signs that said, "Bring them to justice," and the 12 must pay. The world had found its villains, even before it understood the truth. Meanwhile, in secret corners of the world, the members of the Vanguard 12 were still in hiding. They watched the chaos unfold through flickering screens and emergency radios. Some of them were frightened, some felt regret, and a few still believed they had done the right thing. One of them wrote a note in a small diary. "We never meant to hurt anyone. We only wanted to save what we could, but now the world hates us." Far from the noise of cities, in a quiet bunker near the Arctic Circle, the leader of the group sat watching magnetic readings on an old computer. The lines on the screen were not steady. The Earth's field was indeed changing, slowly but surely. He whispered to himself, "They'll understand one day. Maybe too late." But for now, all he could do was wait and hope. As hours turned into days, the investigation deepened. Fragments of code found in satellites revealed something strange. The digital signature of the missiles wasn't random. It was encoded with a repeating pattern. When decoded, the pattern formed a message. 3 words written in old encryption style: "For humanity's survival." This discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Could it be that these people believed they were saving the world? Still, the governments didn't care about the intention. The only thing that mattered was control. The attack, or whatever it was, that had shown the world how fragile it really was. If 12 people could shut down the planet's systems in one night, what could others do next time? So, global leaders promised action. Massive military operations began in multiple countries. Search teams entered old research facilities, scanning for traces of human presence. Special forces found underground tunnels filled with empty computer racks, abandoned notes, and burnt documents. Whoever had worked there was long gone, but there was one clue. In one of the abandoned sites, a camera caught a blurry image. A group of people standing near a metallic structure, wearing protective suits. They looked tired, almost desperate. Behind them, a symbol was painted on the wall, a circle of 12 lines surrounding a single dot in the center. The symbol of the Vanguard 12. The image went viral within hours. News anchors replayed it again and again, each adding their own story around it. Some said it was fake. Others swore it was real. Conspiracy channels filled the internet with theories about secret governments, hidden planets, and doomsday projects. The world that had once been united by peace was now united by fear. In the middle of all this chaos, People started noticing small changes around them. Strange lights appeared in the night sky more often. Compasses gave slightly wrong directions. Birds flew in odd patterns. Scientists said it was all connected. Something had indeed changed in the planet's magnetic field after the missile, event that only made the story more confusing. If the missiles had really affected the magnetic field, had the Vanguard 12 succeeded? Or had they made things worse? Nobody knew. The more governments tried to explain, the more questions appeared. And the world's anger kept growing. Every leader promised to make the 12 pay, but deep inside they were worried too. What if those people were right? What if this was not an attack but a warning? Weeks passed. Electricity slowly returned to normal. Communication systems were rebuilt. Planes began to fly again. The world pretended to calm down, but the scar of that night never healed. People began to distrust their governments. They asked questions that had no answers. What really happened that night? What were those missiles, and why did they not destroy but only silence? In classrooms, teachers told children to remember the day Earth stood still. In cafes, strangers whispered theories. And in quiet homes, some people prayed, not out of faith, but out of fear that the next time those missiles might not stop at the sky. Yet, somewhere far from all this noise, the Vanguard 12 watched and waited. They had not disappeared completely. They moved like shadows, sending hidden signals, collecting new data. Some of them argued it was time to explain the truth to the world. Others warned that humanity was not ready to listen, because what they had discovered, the reason they had launched those 12 missiles, was far more terrifying than anyone imagined. They hadn't done it to destroy. They had done it to delay something coming from deep within the Earth itself. But for now, no one knew that secret. The only thing the world saw was a group of people who had dared to touch the sky, and in doing so had awakened the wrath of all humanity, and the hunt for them was just beginning. Weeks had passed since the night the missiles streaked across the sky. The fear had faded, but the anger had not. Across the world, people demanded answers. News channels repeated the same question every hour. Who are the Vanguard 12? Every country claimed it was close to finding them, but no one really knew where they were. All that existed were fragments, faint satellite traces, old files, and the image of 12 mysterious figures standing near a launch site. To most people, they were villains, ghosts who had thrown the planet into darkness. But to a small number of scientists, there was something strange about what they had done. The attack had not destroyed anything. It had interrupted the world, yes, but it hadn't killed or damaged cities. That was not the behavior of typical terrorists. Still, logic didn't matter to the millions of people whose lives had been thrown into chaos. Every country wanted someone to blame, and so began the biggest global manhunt in human history. The new Global Defense Alliance, and the GDA, was created for one mission only: find the Vanguard 12. Dozens of nations shared their technology. Satellites scanned every inch of the Earth. Intelligence agents went through old records searching for scientists who had gone missing, or who had been fired from classified programs years ago. Air bases, deserts, islands, mountains, nothing was left unchecked. In the middle of all this, people's faith in their governments began to break. Many felt that if 12 people could secretly launch missiles into orbit, then the world was not as safe or controlled as they had been told. In cafes, people whispered that maybe their governments knew more than they were saying. In classrooms, teachers stopped talking about geography and started discussing what might be wrong with the planet itself. Everywhere, people had questions, and no one had answers. Meanwhile, inside the GDA command center, a massive underground complex built in record time, hundreds of experts worked day and night. Walls were covered with maps, timelines, and digital codes. Each screen flashed numbers, satellite images, and communication trails. Their mission was clear, but the target remained invisible. The Vanguard 12 were not amateurs. They knew how to hide. They used old networks, abandoned frequencies, and ancient communication methods, the kind no modern tracking system could easily detect. Some experts even said the group was predicting every move the GDA made, as if they knew their systems from the inside. And maybe they did. After all, these were people who had once built those systems. Every day, the search grew more desperate. New leads appeared and vanished. A few times, the GDA thought they had found one of the members, only to discover it was someone else. Then, One day, something unexpected happened. In a remote mountain village, a local farmer reported seeing strange lights at night. He said a group of people had been camping near an old observatory, carrying equipment that looked like antennas and computers. The report reached the GDA. Within hours, drones were sent to scan the area. What they found shocked them: a hidden base under the observatory, filled with scientific devices powered by makeshift generators. But the people were gone. Only a message was left behind, written on the wall with white paint. "You will not stop what has already begun." That message went viral. The whole world saw it. Some called it a threat. Others saw it as a warning. Either way, it only made people angrier. Television hosts shouted on live broadcasts. Social media exploded with debates. People called the Vanguard 12 cowards, liars, monsters. The more humanity searched for them, the more hatred grew. In cities, huge digital billboards displayed their symbol, a circle with 12 lines, with the words "Wanted" flashing below it. The GDA even announced a massive reward for anyone who could provide information. But not everyone believed the official story. Some people began to think differently. They remembered how the sky had shimmered strangely after the missiles. They remembered how scientists said the planet's magnetic readings had slightly stabilized afterward. A few independent researchers released videos saying that the missiles might have actually prevented something worse, a possible collapse of the magnetic poles. Their voices were small, drowned by anger and politics, but they planted a seed of doubt. What if the Vanguard 12 had been right? In a small newsroom, a journalist began collecting secret reports and testimonies. She found that before the missile launch, several governments had received warnings, coded messages from an unknown sender saying, "Prepare for magnetic shift." But those messages were ignored. The journalist published her findings online. Within hours, the internet divided again, half calling her brave, half calling her a liar spreading terrorist propaganda. The truth, once again, became a battlefield. Inside the GDA, pressure was building. World leaders wanted results. Find them, they said, before the world loses patience. So the alliance increased its efforts. Surveillance expanded to every corner of the Earth. Airports, borders, and communication lines were monitored non-stop. Drones flew over oceans. Satellites peered deep into forests and deserts. And then, a small breakthrough. A fragment of digital code was discovered in the Arctic satellite network. It was an access key, an old encryption pattern used years ago by defense scientists. It matched one of the known signatures of the missiles. Following that signal, the GDA traced it to the cold northern regions, near a group of old research stations left abandoned after climate change studies had ended. A special team was sent quietly, with strict orders not to alert the media. They arrived days later, finding strange electromagnetic readings around one of the stations. The snow was marked by vehicle tracks, and inside the station were signs of recent activity. Warm coffee cups, working computers, and documents scattered across a table. But once again, no people. The Vanguard 12 had escaped, maybe only hours before. One of the computers, however, still displayed a running simulation. It showed a map of Earth's magnetic field, with shifting colors and lines. The data was alarming. It suggested that the field was indeed weakening, just as the 12 had claimed. The team took photos and samples, sent them back to headquarters. When the scientists at the GDA analyzed the data, they went silent. It looked genuine. That created a quiet panic among those who saw it. But none of it reached the public. The data was immediately marked classified. Outside, the world continued to rage. People had turned the Vanguard 12 into symbols of everything they feared: corruption, secrecy, science gone wrong. But they also became something else, an excuse. Governments began passing new laws for global security. More cameras, more monitoring, more control. All in the name of preventing another attack. Some people began to notice this change and started to question: was the hunt for the Vanguard 12 about justice? Or about power? But the noise of anger was too loud for questions. Months later, a strange event occurred. Around the same time each night, across several continents, small bursts of light appeared in the sky. Too small for meteors, too bright for satellites. People filmed them, wondering what they were. The GDA dismissed it as atmospheric interference. But those who studied magnetic data saw something else. The Earth's field was again fluctuating, more unstable than ever before. It was as if the planet was reacting to something unseen. Somewhere out there, in the shadows, the Vanguard 12 were watching. They knew the world was hunting them, and yet they continued their mission. Their plan wasn't over. The missiles were only the beginning. Inside a cold, dim shelter, a tired scientist looked at a radio transmitter and said softly, "They're angry now, but one day they'll know we tried to save them." And as he spoke, another message quietly moved through hidden frequencies, a signal no one was supposed to hear. Phase 2. Await the alignment. The story of the Vanguard 12 was far from over. The wrath of humanity had only just begun. The world had turned into a giant searchlight. Every nation, every agency, every satellite was now focused on one goal: finding the Vanguard 12. It was no longer just a manhunt. It was an obsession. For months, the Global Defense Alliance had chased shadows, clues that disappeared, signals that led nowhere, voices that echoed through abandoned places. But now, after so many failures, world leaders were losing patience. They wanted results. Meetings were held behind closed doors. Maps filled with red dots covered the walls of the command center. Each dot represented a possible location. Drones flew day and night, scanning forests, deserts, oceans, and even the frozen poles. And still, nothing. The Vanguard 12 had become ghosts, moving through the cracks of a world that once watched everything. But while the government searched for them, something else began to change, something deep inside humanity itself. At first, people had been angry. Then they became afraid, and now they were divided. Half of the world believed the 12 were monsters, the cause of every blackout, every glitch, every unexplained event. The other half began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they had done something necessary, something the world was not yet ready to understand. Online, people started sharing clips of scientists who had spoken years ago about the planet's weakening magnetic field. They tried to warn us, some said. Maybe they were right, but others shouted back, they attacked the world. They brought chaos. Families argued. Friends stopped talking. Communities split. Humanity, united in hatred at first, was now tearing itself apart in confusion. The Vanguard 12 had not only changed the planet, they had changed its people. Far away from the cities, in the cold silence of the Arctic, one of the 12 sat in a small metal room. Outside, the wind howled endlessly, brushing against the walls like a distant voice. Inside, a dim screen glowed softly, showing a map of the Earth. Lines of color moved slowly across it, magnetic currents, shifting and flickering. He had been watching them for weeks, recording every small change. Each day, the readings grew more unstable. The field was still weakening despite the missile launch. He rubbed his tired eyes. "We bought time," he whispered, "but not enough." He looked at a small photograph taped to the wall, a picture of a city, full of light and people, taken before all of this began. He used to believe humanity could change peacefully. That belief had vanished. Now the world wanted his head. The radio on his desk crackled suddenly. A voice came through, the soft, distant, and careful. It was another member of the 12, calling from thousands of miles away. "Are you safe?" the voice asked. "For now," he replied. "But they're getting closer. The others? Scattered. Some have stopped talking. Some are afraid. We can't run forever." There was silence for a moment. Then the voice said, "You were right. They'll never listen until it's too late." The transmission ended. The man sat back, closing his eyes. He remembered the day they decided to launch the missiles. The endless debates, the fear, the guilt. They had believed they were saving the world, but now he wasn't sure anymore. Maybe they had only made things worse. Meanwhile, in the outside world, the GDA finally caught a break. A satellite picked up strange electromagnetic pulses coming from Iceland, faint, rhythmic, and patterned like a heartbeat. It was too specific to be natural. Immediately, the command center came alive with energy. Orders were given, planes prepared, special teams readied for deployment. Within hours, a small convoy was moving toward the icy region. The mission was simple: locate the source of the signal and capture whoever was behind it. Back home, the news channels buzzed with rumors. "A major operation is underway," said one anchor. "This could be it." The world held its breath. Days passed with no update. The GDA remained silent. Then finally an announcement, short, careful, and vague. The Alliance has secured one of the remaining bases connected to the Vanguard 12. Evidence is being analyzed. But when people saw the leaked images, confusion replaced excitement. The so-called base wasn't a military site. It was a research cabin filled with computers, scientific notebooks, and a single message written on the wall. The poles are moving faster than you think. That message spread everywhere. It was translated into every language, printed on posters, turned into songs, even carved into walls. People didn't fully understand it, but it made them curious. And that curiosity began to grow into doubt. The GDA tried to control the narrative. They said it was propaganda. They said the Vanguard 12 were lying. But when people compared that message with recent strange events, weather shifts, compass errors, auroras seen near the equator, many began to think the 12 had told the truth. Inside government halls, some scientists quietly admitted the same thing. The planet's magnetic field was indeed behaving strangely. But admitting it publicly could cause panic, so they stayed silent. As weeks turned into months, humanity's anger started to twist. People were still furious, but they were no longer sure who they should be angry at. The Vanguard 12, or their own leaders for hiding the truth. Protests began to rise again. Not against the 12 this time, but against those in power. People demanded transparency. They wanted answers about what the governments really knew. And all over the world, fear and frustration mixed together like a storm. In one small town, a group of people gathered every night near a hilltop to look at the stars. They said the sky looked different since the missile event, brighter, more alive. Some even said they could feel a strange vibration in the air, like the Earth itself was breathing differently. No one could explain it. In the Arctic bunker, the scientist continued his work in silence. He was exhausted, but he couldn't stop. The data on his screen showed something terrifying. The next magnetic shift could happen sooner than anyone expected. He opened a notebook filled with handwritten calculations, drawings, and coordinates. On the last page, he wrote, "They call it an attack. One day they'll call it a warning." Suddenly his radio buzzed again. This time the message was short and urgent. "They've found us," the voice said. He looked out through the small window. Far away on the white horizon, faint lights moved. Not the northern lights, but aircraft. He took a deep breath and switched off all power. The lights on his computer faded and the room went dark. Outside, the wind grew louder. He whispered to himself, "If this is how it ends, then so be it. At least we tried." The world would never know that in that frozen silence he was not preparing for escape or destruction. He was transmitting something. A coded message sent deep into the magnetic field. One last attempt to stabilize it before his systems went offline. Back at the GDA, sensors across the planet suddenly detected a strange surge, a pulse invisible but powerful. It spread quietly through the Earth's field, calming some of the fluctuations for a brief moment. Scientists were confused. Some called it a natural event. Others suspected it was another move by the Vanguard 12. But the truth was lost in the storm of human emotion. By now, most people had stopped caring about the details. They just wanted peace, normal life, electricity that never failed, skies that didn't flash with strange lights. The mystery had gone on too long and everyone was tired, but what none of them knew was that the story was not ending. It was only entering its most dangerous stage. Because the more humanity searched for the Vanguard 12, the closer they came to learning the truth. A truth that could either unite them forever or break them completely. And somewhere, hidden beneath layers of snow and silence, the faint symbol of a circle with 12 lines remained carved into a wall, untouched by time, glowing softly under the pale light, a reminder that they had not been stopped, only delayed, and the Earth slowly but surely was beginning to change again. Months had turned into a year since the night the sky burned with 12 streaks of light. The world had changed in ways no one could fully explain. The skies were brighter, the weather shifted strangely, and compasses no longer pointed perfectly north. Scientists called it a magnetic drift. People called it the Earth's revenge. But despite all this, the search for the Vanguard 12 never stopped. The Global Defense Alliance had grown larger, more powerful and more determined than ever. It now had control over satellites, space stations, and global communication networks. They had one mission: find every last member of the Vanguard 12 and bring them to justice. For most people, the 12 had become a myth, a story that lived on through news channels, songs, and documentaries. Children in schools learned about them as the scientists who attacked the world. But behind the official story, secret reports kept arriving. Reports of unusual magnetic surges, strange signals, and unexplainable power waves coming from deep under the earth. Every few weeks, someone claimed to have seen one of the 12. Sometimes in deserts, sometimes near mountains, sometimes in old research facilities. Most of these stories turned out false, but one day a lead changed everything. In the mountains of South America, a quiet valley was discovered where magnetic readings were unusually stable. It was the only place on Earth where compasses worked perfectly. A small GDA team went to investigate. What they found was shocking. Hidden beneath layers of rock and roots was a small underground shelter powered by handmade solar panels. Inside they found computers, notebooks, and equipment that matched the technology used in the missile launches. On one of the screens, data was still running, tracking the planet's magnetic movement in real time, and then, as they explored deeper, they found them. Not all 12, but a few. Tired, thin and silent, they did not resist. They simply watched as the soldiers surrounded them. One of them said softly, "You took long enough." That was the day the world finally captured the Vanguard 12. News of their arrest spread like wildfire. Cameras filled the air. Every country demanded to take part in their trial. The streets were flooded with people cheering, shouting, and crying. Some saw it as justice. Others saw it as a tragedy. The GDA announced a public tribunal, a trial that would be broadcast to every part of the world. The entire planet would finally hear the truth. When the day came, billions watched their screens. The room where the trial took place was quiet, cold, and filled with reporters. The 12 were brought in, escorted by guards. They didn't look like villains. They looked like people who had carried too much weight for too long. A global judge stood at the center. "You stand accused of crimes against humanity," he said. "Launching unauthorized weapons, disrupting the world's systems, and spreading fear across nations. Do you have anything to say?" The leader of the group, the same man who once sat alone in the Arctic watching magnetic lines on a screen, slowly stood up. His voice was calm, almost sad. "We didn't do it to destroy," he said. "We did it to delay." The courtroom went silent. He continued, "The planet's magnetic field is collapsing. You may not want to believe it, but it's true. We discovered the signs years ago, the shifts, the cracks, the weakening poles. We told your governments. We begged them to act. They called us mad. They shut down our research, so we did the only thing we could." The judge frowned. "By launching missiles at the Earth?" "They weren't missiles," the man said. "They were stabilizers. Devices designed to release electromagnetic pulses in targeted areas to slow down the collapse. We didn't attack the Earth, we tried to save it." Murmurs filled the room. Some reporters gasped. Others shook their heads. The man looked around, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "The truth was never meant to scare you. It was meant to prepare you. We failed to warn you in time, so we acted. Not out of anger, out of fear that your children would grow up in a world without sunlight, without power, without safety." The judge leaned forward. "Then why not tell the world? Why not explain before acting?" He gave a faint smile. "Would you have listened?" No one answered. The silence in the courtroom was thicker than air. The man spoke again. "After the launch, the field stabilized, temporarily. You call it luck. But look at your skies now. Look at your compasses. Look at your climate. The Earth is changing faster than you realize." He paused. "The missiles were only the first step. They bought time, a few years, maybe a decade. But the shift will come again. And when it does, you'll need to act together, not as enemies, but as one species." The judge asked, "And what is this shift you speak of?" "The polar reversal," the man said. "The planet turning inside out. It happens every few thousand years, and we're close to it now. The next shift could destroy our systems, erase our satellites, and make the planet unrecognizable." The crowd murmured in disbelief. Some scientists in the audience nodded quietly. The man looked at the cameras. "We knew what we did would make the world hate us. But we didn't care about fame or forgiveness. We cared about survival." His final words echoed through the courtroom. "We didn't bring humanity's wrath. Humanity's ignorance did. After the trial, the world was split once again. Some believed them, others called it manipulation. Governments argued, experts debated, and social media exploded with theories. The truth was both unbelievable and undeniable. The Earth's magnetic field really had been acting strange for years, and now people wanted to know why this information was hidden. A few scientists stepped forward, confirming that the data the Vanguard 12 had collected was accurate. But world leaders avoided commenting. They didn't want panic. The GDA, under pressure, released a short statement. The Vanguard 12 acted without authorization. Their actions remain a threat to global safety. The Yao captured members were taken away to a secret facility for questioning. No one ever saw them again. But something strange happened after that. Around the same time as their disappearance, a sudden magnetic calm spread across the planet. Compasses began to stabilize. Satellite signals improved. Even the auroras that had been glowing unpredictably in southern skies started fading. It was as if the planet had taken a deep breath and rested. Some people called it coincidence. Others called it proof. In schools, children drew pictures of the 12 scientists standing under a glowing sky, calling them the Guardians. In cities, murals appeared on walls, a circle with 12 lines, the symbol of the Vanguard. And somewhere deep inside the Earth, something seemed to shift, quietly, gently, as if acknowledging the effort of those who tried to protect it. Months later, a document leaked online, supposedly written by the leader before his capture. It read, "If you are reading this, we are gone. But remember, we didn't try to destroy what you built. We tried to keep it standing. The wrath you showed us was the same wrath we feared from the planet itself. But if you learn one thing from our mistake, let it be this. The Earth doesn't need saving. Humanity does, and from its own disbelief." The message spread across the internet, shared by millions. Some cried, some laughed, some ignored it. But for a moment, the world stopped arguing. For a moment, humanity looked up at the sky, not with fear, but with wonder. No one knew whether the 12 were still alive, or if they had been erased quietly from history. But one thing was certain: their message had survived. And somewhere, maybe hidden deep in an old bunker or high on a frozen mountain, one of them might still be watching the skies, waiting for the next shift, the one they knew was coming. The world called them criminals. Years had passed since the trial that shook the world. The faces of the Vanguard 12 had slowly faded from television screens, from newspapers, from conversations. The governments called them criminals. Schools taught that their actions were reckless. History painted them as the reason for global panic. But in the quiet corners of the world, in research labs, online forums, and small gatherings of thinkers, their names still lived on. Something about their story refused to die. The world had grown calmer on the surface. The strange magnetic surges had faded, and life began to feel normal again. Cities rebuilt, technology stabilized, and people returned to their routines. But underneath that calm, something was changing. Compasses once again began to behave strangely. Satellite signals blinked off for minutes at a time. Migrating birds started losing their sense of direction. It began slowly, quietly. The kind of change most people ignored until it was too big to overlook. And then one morning, without warning, people around the world woke up to see the skies glowing. Not just in the north or south, everywhere. Green and blue curtains of light stretched across the horizon, dancing like waves. People came out of their homes, staring upward in silence. It was beautiful and terrifying. The news called it the global aurora. Scientists called it a magnetic anomaly. But some people whispered another name: the return. Within hours, power grids flickered. Navigation systems glitched. Air traffic halted. The same fear that once filled the world years ago began to rise again. And just as chaos threatened to return, something unexpected happened. In a quiet control room at an old observatory in Chile, a technician noticed a strange signal on his monitor. It wasn't random. It was rhythmic, patterned, almost like a heartbeat. When they decoded the signal, a message appeared on the screen. It was short, written in plain text: "This is not the end. The balance is shifting. Do not fear it. Guide it." No one could explain where the message came from. The signal had no source. It seemed to originate from within the Earth itself. At first, the government dismissed it as a hoax. But then, across the world, other observatories began reporting the same thing. The same signal, the same message, repeating every few hours. People started to remember. Old videos of the Vanguard 12 resurfaced online. Clips from their trial were replayed millions of times. The moment when the leader had said, "We didn't attack the Earth, we tried to save it," that line became viral again. Suddenly, everything they had warned about seemed to be happening. The global mood changed once more. Instead of anger, there was confusion and curiosity. People began digging up their old research. Secret government reports were leaked, showing that the 12 had indeed discovered signs of an approaching magnetic shift long before anyone else. The truth could no longer be buried. Governments finally admitted that the planet's magnetic poles were moving faster than ever before, not over centuries, but possibly within decades. They promised to prepare, but most people knew it was too late to start fresh. Across the world, something new began. Not panic, but unity. Scientists, engineers, and thinkers from every country started working together. They shared data openly for the first time in history. They didn't call it an emergency response. They called it the Continuum Project. Its goal was not to stop the shift, but to adapt to it, to protect life during the change. They used old files, blueprints, and research notes from the Vanguard 12, the very data once labeled forbidden. It was as if the ghosts of the 12 were guiding them. In one hidden file, marked Code Horizon, they discovered coordinates, 12 of them spread across the planet. When the teams traveled to those locations, they found small devices buried deep in the ground, perfectly preserved stabilizers. Each one was still active, pulsing with faint electromagnetic energy. They realized that the 12 hadn't just launched weapons, they had created a planetary shield. Each device had been silently regulating the field, holding the planet together for years. And now, they were running out of power. A race began. Teams worked day and night to keep the devices alive. They upgraded the technology, repaired circuits, and built new systems around them. It was hard, dangerous work, but it brought people together like never before. Countries stopped fighting over borders. Scientists shared discoveries freely. The world was finally united, not by fear but by purpose. One night, while engineers worked on one of the last stabilizers deep under the Pacific Ocean, the systems flickered. For a moment, the control screens went black. Then a faint image appeared, static at first, then slowly forming into a face. It was blurry but recognizable. One of the Vanguard 12. The workers froze, unsure if it was real or just a data glitch. The figure spoke, his voice calm and familiar. "If you're hearing this, then the shift has begun. Don't stop it. Don't fight it. Help it find balance." The image faded. The signal ended. That message was shared with the world the next morning. Some said it was an automated recording. Others swore it was live. A real transmission from somewhere deep below. Either way, it reignited something powerful inside humanity: hope. The Continuum Project pushed forward. They created new stabilizers based on the 12's old blueprints and placed them in orbit. The planet's field began to settle again, slowly but noticeably. For the first time in a long while, people felt proud of what humanity could do together. And then, one morning, something incredible happened. As the sun rose over the Earth, the skies shimmered again, not with chaos this time, but with harmony. Waves of soft light covered the planet, like the Earth was glowing from within. Compasses pointed north again. The air felt still. Satellites realigned. The field had balanced. Scientists confirmed it. The planet had entered a stable magnetic phase. The catastrophic shift had been avoided, or at least delayed for centuries, and yet no one could explain exactly how. Some credited human cooperation. Some credited luck. But those who believed in the Vanguard 12 had another theory, that their technology, their knowledge, and maybe even their presence had helped guide the planet back into balance. Years later, the world would build 12 monuments, one for each member of the Vanguard. Not as criminals, not as heroes, but as the guardians of balance. Each monument bore the same inscription carved in stone. They carried the weight of the world, even when the world turned against them. Children visited these sites on field trips, Teachers told the story, not of the attack, but of the warning. People lit candles at night, not out of fear but gratitude. And somewhere far away, deep in the ice, a single cabin still stood. Inside, an old screen flickered to life for the first time in years. A message appeared, glowing softly in the dark. They finally understand. Then, quietly, the screen went dark again. No one knew who sent that message, or if any of the Vanguard 12 were still alive. But many believed that they had never truly died, that they had simply disappeared into the very heart of the Earth they tried to protect. In the end, humanity learned the truth. It was never about war or power or punishment. It was about survival, about listening before it's too late, about trusting those who see beyond the noise. The Vanguard 12 had been hunted, hated, and forgotten, but their legacy became the foundation of a new world, one that finally understood that the planet itself was not the enemy, but the greatest ally we ever had. As years turned into centuries, people still told their story under glowing skies, and when the auroras danced once more across the horizon, they said quietly to each other, "They're watching, and they're proud."